Hello, my name is Jo Shug. We bought a house in Mona Street in 1987 and moved into it in 1990 with 3 children under the age of 7. We subsequently had another baby within the first 12 months, so a family of 4 lived in a 4-roomed cottage. It was a weatherboard cottage built in 1847. Our toilet was in the garden and our bath was in a corner cupboard in the kitchen. We lived like that for 3 years, but it clearly became obvious that we had to extend. The signal to extend was that one night my husband heard our youngest child at that time go into the toilet in the garden in the middle of the winter, but didn't hear her come back. And when he went to investigate, she'd fallen fast asleep on the toilet with the door open with snow on the mountain. So having got into bed, he said, "Jo, we have to do something about this." So within 3 years of that event, we extended the back of our home. A large hole was dug into our garden, a built-in veranda, the toilet, the kitchen and the bath in the corner of the kitchen were removed and the renovation began. We actually had to move out. We moved out for 12 months, but when we moved back, we had a really lovely family home. It accommodated our family. It's always been a family home, and although we're not living there now, it remains our primary family home. We had 15 years in Battery Point with our children. Our children went to Albura Street, and we very quickly became part of a very happy village. Battery Point in the 1990s, early 2000s was a community of students, families that had lived there for many years, and some young families that had come into the neighbourhood. I became part of the Battery Point Progress Association, and through joining the community association, I began to get to know some of the older and younger members of Battery Point. There were some wonderful stories. One that I remember very fondly was a group of women who saved money to buy the lampposts on Hampden Road. One of the members of the group had gone to England, saw these lampposts, found out where they were made and put in an order. And 5 years later, many cake stalls, many coffee mornings in the Battery Point Hall, their pride and joy arrived. So next time you walk down Hampden Road, please look at the lampposts and remember they were paid for with cake, coffee mornings and cake stalls. Battery Point then had 3 shops. We had 3 corner shops. We had Mr. Fox's, we had the shop on the corner opposite Angelo's, which changed hands many times, and of course the infamous lolly shop. So from being a resident's point of view, we could post a letter, have our teeth done, visit a GP, buy anything you wanted at the choice of 3 shops, and walk with our children to school. Our daily walk to school was a very special part of being in Battery Point. And our children befriended a lady who lived at the Sandy Bay Road end of Albura Street. Every morning she'd be with her pink dressing gown at the gate to say hello. She had a cat, which our children also enjoyed, and every Christmas it gave children great joy to bake some biscuits and gave them to the lady. We never knew her name. She was the lady in the pink dressing gown. The children quickly got to know dogs, cats, people in the neighbourhood, and their playground was a glorious array of getting tiddlers from the stream at the bottom of Clark Avenue, playing in the Napoleon Street Park, playing in Prince's Park, but also the joy of being old enough to take your bike down to the back of what is now the Salamanca development and play in the quarry area. Their other joy, of course, was walking to Salamanca Market and spending all their money at the Lolly Bazaar, which was also housed at the back of the quarry in a large old shed, as far as I can remember, which had a lolly bazaar, a child's heaven. Bert and I moved away from Battery Point in 2005. He took a job on the northwest coast, and our house has subsequently been rented out. It has never been empty. It is a happy house, and tenants certainly sense the joy of the house when they open the front door. And of course, Bert and I are now in a position, he's retired, to be working out whether we're going to come back or not. One of the big draw cards, of course, for us with Battery Point are our memories of the wonderful Christmas parties at the community hall, Miss Henslow setting up her nativity crib each year, and each year possibly a little bit fell off, the wooden figures, some lost a hand, maybe the baby was missing, maybe the crib lost a little bit of the rock, but it didn't matter. Angelo was Father Christmas, generous with the pizzas. We all lined up and sat around the edge of the hall and caught up on what our year had been and enjoyed the joy of getting together the Christmas tree and Miss Henslow's wooden Christmas nativity set. Other joys were our neighbours. We had one particularly eccentric neighbour with Alicia Johnson, who used to knock on my door. Rat-a-tat-tat, she used to go, "Joe, I think I'd like to draw a drawing from your veranda." And really it didn't matter if I was up to my ears with getting children ready for school, up to my ears and about to produce a meal, up to my ears trying to get out for a sporting event. "Don't worry, Joe, if you're on your way out, I'll just sit on the veranda, do my drawing and make my way home." Another event was when Miss Kimber, who was 86 and lived opposite Henslow Park, walked into hall to find a robber. And at the age of 86, not only did she usher the robber out of her house, but actually chased him down the street. And that was an infamous event. Alicia unfortunately became quite incapacitated, and it was challenging to get stuck behind Alicia on her gopher in Kelly Street or South Street, because she was a slow mover and she would stop and start. She'd stop to talk to people and had no problem, if you tooted your horn, on waving her stick at you and taking even longer. One of the joys for young boys growing up in Battery Point was the coming of age. At about the age of 9 or 10, the invitation would be handed out to accompany Miss Henslow on a trip to the Battery. Miss Henslow was the proud custodian of what felt like the only key to the Battery, and once or twice a year word would get out that Miss Henslow was taking a group. And for a 9 or 10-year-old boy to go with Miss Henslow down to Princes Park, unlock that grille door and enter the Battery was the true coming of age. Another event was one day my brother-in-law was painting the fence outside his house, and he came over to me and said, "Joe, I think you should ring the police. I think a patient from the psychiatric unit has just walked down the street. He doesn't look well. He's got a blanket on and a hospital band, pyjamas and no shoes. I think maybe we should just ring the police." So I rang the police and walked back over to my brother-in-law and was talking to him, and as we were talking, a police car came up the street very slowly and wound down its window. And my brother-in-law turned round and walked towards the police car, and I realised that he had very short shorts, no socks, sneakers, pink rubber gloves and a knotted handkerchief on his head and a very large paintbrush. And I thought, well, how about this? He's walking towards the police to tell them that somebody that looks a bit vulnerable has just walked down the street. Well, hello, you might be put in the back seat, Mickey. Another element of young families living with ageing families was the pastoral care of people that are growing older in Battery Point. And I remember one day walking past Miss Henslow's with Peter and sadly seeing Miss Henslow lying on the garden path. And I thought, oh dear, what's happened here? But actually she'd fallen but was unable to get up. But I called an ambulance, and the ambulance duly arrived, and Miss Henslow path was quite steep and not easy. So they got the stretcher, the wheels rattled up the pathway, Miss Henslow looked at me, I looked at Miss Henslow. They put her on the stretcher and they rose the stretcher up to full height to get her out. And as they did it, she rose from the stretcher like a phoenix from the fire and said, "Jolly good job, well done all of you." I, of course, had thought that perhaps things were more gloomy than that, so it was a relief to see Miss Henslow back to her former self. There is a greengage tree in an unknown location which I will not reveal, and I foolishly revealed it to a friend who was a cook. One night the greengages were ripe, I saw a full moon, and I went down to the greengage tree. I had my basket on my arm. I scaled the fence, which was not easy, and as I got to the top of the fence and started to go over, a loud voice said, "What do you think you're doing?" And of course he had got there before me. But that was a very frightening moment. Our last baby actually was our only planned baby. The fourth of 4, and quite a gap. Everyone felt he was a mistake, but he was actually planned. And having announced our pregnancy, Bert and I woke up one morning to find a stork had arrived on the top of our chimney. Now it just so happened that Tom Samick lived opposite, and Mickey Pold, who was a musician. And Mickey and Tom put their heads together and created a beautiful stork out of an old violin, a pair of laundry tongs, and another ingenious set of laundry tongs as a head. They put the sculpted stork onto a nest made out of wound old vines, and in the beak of the laundry tongs they hung a canvas swaddling bag with a little baby inside. So we woke up to find a stork on the top of our chimney, which was a very, very special Battery Point moment. So from the stalk of our chimney, all our babies have flown. We've flown, but I'm pretty sure we'll be back, because for all of us, our memories of children, marriage, community life in Battery Point have been very, very rich and very, very happy.